You've arrived at Adventures in Dreamland. Soft, surreal, and slightly cheeky sleep stories with awe and wonder. I'm Serene, your guide tonight. Whether you're here for sleepy science, surreal dreamscapes, or stories that shape who you're becoming, I'm grateful you're here. I write these stories to help you drift and grow. Each night, you're welcomed into a dreamy space from across the world. I'd love to know where you are and what makes your space extra cozy. Running a story cabin in the clouds isn't free. The greatest gift you can give to support my work is sharing our adventures with a friend. Now, we return to what we are. Every living organism on this planet, no matter how small or complex, wants the same thing. Every action we take is for this one thing: to avoid pain and obtain bliss. Bliss is a state of endless joy, mixed with peace beyond our knowing. Whether you call it the soul, awareness, or your highest self, that part of you, during deep sleep, temporarily withdraws from the body and the conscious mind and returns to the freedom and unity with the divine. Bliss without awareness. This restores not just the body and mind, but our spirits too, offering a sense of inner peace and clarity. So yes, sleep is sacred. You are returning back to your natural state. Freedom. Your story begins. The House That Cleans Itself is episode 8 and the first of our Dream Spoofs series, where we appreciate the silly side of life softly. The dream begins with you standing at the edge of a picturesque house, its front yard stretching out before you like a lush green blanket. The golden hues of the setting sun bathe everything in a warm glow, and the air carries the fresh scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. As you watch, the yard begins to come alive with a gentle magic. Leaves that were scattered on the lawn start swirling together, forming neat little piles, all on their own. The flower beds seem to bloom just a bit brighter, petals perking up as if they know they're being watched. You notice even the windows starting to clean themselves, one pane at a time, until they sparkle in the fading light. A gentle rustling catches your ear, and you realize the gutters are being cleared of leaves and debris, while a few persistent wasps are gently shooed away from their nests. It's as if the house is giving itself a little spa day, just for your arrival. You can't help but chuckle, thinking, did I accidentally hire a team of invisible garden gnomes? Or is my house just trying to impress me? With everything outside looking so pristine, you take a deep breath and step towards the front door, which opens with a welcoming creak. You're ready to discover the magic that awaits inside, knowing that each room will hold its own delightful surprises. You step inside, and before you can so much as close the door behind you, the house is already on it. Shoes, The word rings out with a light chime and a lot of attitude, not stern, but the kind of sass that only someone who really cares about you can pull off. Your laces untie themselves like they've been scolded before, and a cozy bench slides into place behind your knees. Sit, it seems to say. You need a minute. A burst of warm air rises from the floorboards, not hot, just gentle, like a bakery vent, and you watch your socks puff up slightly as the moisture from outside disappears into the ether. Your coat lifts from your shoulders before you can shrug, folds itself neatly, and disappears into a cubby labeled handled. From down the hall, you hear a washer door click shut, a soft whir. Your clothes from earlier are already mid-spin. You didn't put them there. The house did. Those grass stains on your jeans, the house says, somewhere from the vents or the floorboards, or maybe just the walls. Gone. You're welcome. A mop twirls past the doorway, humming to itself as it dances forward, with a swoop and a pirouette, leaving a trail of lemon sparkle behind. You raise an eyebrow. It twirls again, then freezes mid-spin. Don't act like I'm not impressive, it says, then glides off smugly. You glance into the mirror. Somehow, you look more rested. Hair tousled in the right way, eyes kind. The light here does you favors. Of course it does. The scent of orange blossom and lavender drifts through the room, not from a candle, but from the very breath of the house itself. Now then, the house says, her voice dropping to a low, affectionate purr. You're clean. You're home. Let's get you cozy. And with that, a hallway stretches out ahead, softly lit, quietly humming, waiting. You follow the gentle glow down the hallway and step into the kitchen. And oh, she's already judging your posture. The room is warm with a golden underlight, not hot, just the kind of warmth that says, you should have been here sooner, sweetheart. Cabinets blink open like eyelids, slow and knowing. A tea kettle gives a low whistle, not boiling yet, just clearing its throat. The scent of something toasty and almondy curls in the air, like cookies were recently removed from the oven, just for you. You're under-caffeinated, the kitchen declares with confidence. You haven't said a word. A cup slides forward on the counter. A splash of something warm and creamy lands inside, with a swirl that's frankly show-offy. You turn toward the pantry, just in time to catch it expanding. Shelves slide outward, revealing an endless carousel of quiet delights. Honey with floral notes from a place you've never visited. Crackers stacked like architectural plans. Nut butters labeled with winks. Smooth talker. Crunch with a punch. Jams from berries that may or may not exist in this realm. Your stomach rumbles. The fridge gasps. Don't embarrass us, the house whispers through the vents. You know you're about to be fed. A drawer opens silently. Inside, a warm biscuit. Just one. Somehow perfect. Buttery. Flaky. Waiting with the poise of a gift. You reach for it. The biscuit lets itself be picked up. It knows it was made for this. You bite in, heaven, absolutely uncalled for levels of heaven. Somewhere behind you, the coffee machine lets out a tiny smug ding. You lean against the counter, eyes half closed, while an invisible breeze rustles the herb plants by the window. Thyme, basil, rosemary, each of them faintly glowing, each of them growing just for you. The kitchen gives you a moment. Then the voice returns, cheeky, bossy, loving. Okay, darling, snack's over. There's a whole house to greet you. Pantries locked and loaded. Let's go. The door to the dining room creaks open on its own. A new scent waits just beyond. Wood polish, candle wax, something simmering far away. The house is just getting started. Mini beat, dining room, the theater of meals past. The dining room greets you like an old friend in formal wear. The table is already set, not with dishes, but with memories. Light pours in from a chandelier that gently twirls, just once, as if curtsying. The wood beneath your feet creaks affectionately, like it remembers your last visit. The chairs, tall-backed, velvety, a bit dramatic, scoot back on their own, not to invite you to sit, but to say, "Look, darling, we've already made room for you." A long linen runner stretches down the table, embroidered with invisible scenes from meals you can almost remember, laughter around winter stews, clinking glasses during thunderstorms, candlelit snacks that turned into midnight confessions. You notice something strange. The center of the table holds a single silver platter, empty, until it isn't. A wisp of scent rises, cinnamon, rosemary, maybe a hint of orange peel. Then a swirl of light. The platter shows you what it could hold, not what it does. It flickers, roasted roots, buttery pastas, laughing guests who fade in and out like ghosts who mean well. The house doesn't need to feed you here. It feeds your memory instead. The moment is brief, like the pause before a second course. And then the great room calls. From the next space, you hear a faint crackle of fire, the creak of an overstuffed chair stretching its arms, and music, soft, familiar, like someone left the record spinning just for you. The dining room hums its final note and gently ushers you on. You step into the great room, and it's like the house exhales. The lighting softens, warmer here, all amber and cocoa, and slow afternoon sun. No overheads, just a collection of glowing lamps with quiet personalities. One wears a tilted shade like a beret. Another hums faint jazz, pretending not to. A fireplace crackles on cue, not too loud. Electric blue flames, like the ones from the train dream. Your house remembers everything. It purrs, content, warming the stones beneath it. flickering reflections across the room. There are blankets everywhere, casually draped, effortlessly fluffed, but you get the feeling they've been waiting just for you. One blanket climbs gently off the arm of the couch and wraps around your shoulders like a soft hug from a memory. A second one slides to your feet, offering itself like a footstool. The couch sighs as you sit, not with age, but with satisfaction. "Took you long enough," it says, but kindly. The cushions mold beneath you in slow waves, like they're remembering your shape from another lifetime. Just as you sink into the cushions, the house springs to life, not urgently, more like a proud little show. A feather duster zips across the windowsills, twirling like it's auditioning for a musical. The coffee table polishes itself with a puff of lemon mist, then turns slightly, like it's posing. Even the rug gets fluffed from underneath, straightening its edges with a gentle shimmy. A mop rolls by with a dramatic huff, muttering something about muddy footprints it already cleaned 3 times. And the fireplace, not to be outdone, tosses an extra spark just for flair. The house wants you to see it, not because it needs your approval, but because it enjoys being good at taking care of you. Books peek out from shelves with curiosity. A record player in the corner turns itself on without asking, dropping the needle into something dreamy, something low and sleepy. Not words, just music that feels like the inside of a warm mug. And there, just for a moment, the house lets its walls sway. Not literally, but emotionally, like it's dancing, just a little. You feel it, not movement, but presence. That lovely, sassy spirit that scrubs your boots and folds your laundry now whispers, "You're home, babe. You can stop trying so hard." A sleepy breeze drifts in through half-open curtains. The room holds you like a favorite memory, one that isn't finished yet. The door opens with a swish, and in you step. It's a room with a bit of an identity crisis, but the charming kind. On one side, a polished desk with soft amber lighting, and a chair that scoots itself back for you with a courteous bloop. Notebooks are stacked like pancakes, pens uncapped and ready. A window opens just a crack to let in a breeze that smells like morning ideas. And just across from it, the mood shifts. A yoga mat unrolls itself slowly. A punching bag sways lightly, like it's been warming up without you. Even the dumbbells sparkle a little. One of them winks. You might have imagined that. The house hums thoughtfully. Some days you think, some days you sweat, it seems to say. Both are sacred. A mini fridge nearby opens with a hiss and hands you a chilled coconut water before closing itself with a satisfied click. This room gets you. The double doors part like curtains to reveal drama. Not chaos, elegance, but make it a little extra. You step into the bathroom and hear the faint sound of harp strings. The tub is already filling, steam curling into soft shapes. It smells faintly of vanilla and rain. The tub itself is a small lagoon, sunken into the marble floor, with tiny lights under the surface that glow like fireflies. "Welcome to your thinking pond," the house declares. At the vanity, a drawer slides open and offers you the softest towel you've ever touched, folded with love and maybe a little sass. The mirror lights up automatically, but very softly. You're allowed to be radiant without being interrogated. Over in the corner, a robe fluffs itself. You haven't even asked. Then, as you pad toward the closet, the floor warms slightly beneath your steps, just enough to notice. And the closet? Oh, the closet. It goes on forever. Racks slide back and forth like library ladders. Shelves whisper suggestions. One handbag sways a little, hoping to be chosen. Shoes arrange themselves by mood. Even a drawer of socks seems to know who you are today. Statement or comfort, the house teases. You can be both. You laugh softly to yourself, wrapping the robe tighter. It's hard to know where to go next, but you get the sense the house already knows. But instead of stepping into the tub, the house offers a different kind of magic. A warm shimmer rises around you, invisible but certain. You feel it like a whisper, that post-bath softness, as if you've already been scrubbed, soaked, and serenely patted dry. Your skin feels smooth, your hair perfectly towel-dried. Your body sighs in relief without lifting a finger. Efficiency is elegance, the house hums. With a wink, you can somehow feel. Then, in front of the mirror, something unexpected. The mirror chimes in, full of unsolicited opinion. "You're doing amazing, sweetie." A pause. Then, "Honestly, best jawline on the block." Not everyone can pull off sleepy and stunning, but here you are. You laugh, and so does the mirror. A sparkly little giggle that somehow feels sincere. By the time the brushing ends, you feel fresh, radiant, and yet the right amount of ridiculous. The robe tightens around you once more, and the bathroom lights dim slightly as if giving you a nod. Go on now. You've got rooms to enchant. A toothbrush floats up and begins brushing your teeth for you, as if summoned by pure laziness and luxury. The mirror lights up, not with your reflection, but with opinions. "You, my friend," it says in a dramatic whisper, "are the Marcus Aurelius of minty freshness." A pause. "The world may crumble, empires may fall, but you floss with fortitude." The toothbrush pauses, mid-swish. You have the resilience of a Roman emperor and the molars of a Greek statue. Honestly, terrifying. A second toothbrush joins in, because apparently you deserve a team, and they high-five mid-air before continuing. Then, as the final rinse swirls gently into your mouth, the mirror flashes. Suffering is optional, but gingivitis, never. A golden light beams down like applause from heaven. And just like that, you're clean, confident, and spiritually moisturized. As you admire yourself in the mirror, more affirmations from the mirror fill the room. You are brave. You are brilliant. You once parallel parked on the first try and nobody clapped, but I saw. The mirror sparkles like it's proud of you. You are the limited edition. You are the main quest. The universe is lucky to have you, and so is your toothpaste. You smile, and your front tooth sparkles back to the toothpaste. You feel like you unwillingly entered into a cheesy commercial. Catch yourself and move onward. You step inside the bedroom and the air shifts. It's cooler, softer, like a cloud pressed pause just for you. The lights dim on their own. The curtains draw themselves with a swoosh, and the bed gives a gentle little exhale, as if it's been waiting all day just to hold you. Your sheets flutter once in the air like dancers, then self-tuck with military precision and spa-like grace. The pillows plump themselves up proudly. One even gives a little wiggle, like, pick me. The mattress, it doesn't sag or protest. It welcomes, like it already knows the shape of your body and is ready to remember you. Above, the ceiling fan begins its slow, loving swirl, each rotation whispering something encouraging. You nailed it today. You are 93% stardust and 7% excellent decision making. You're the kind of cozy this world needs more of. Your blanket floats over you without a wrinkle. The corner tucks itself with a tiny wink, and right at that moment, a subtle breeze nudges open your window just enough for the moon to peek in, and you hear it, the RSVP, not from a guest, but from your dreams. They're coming, on time, dressed in their best, with stories to tell and memories to make. You close your eyes, and in this room that cleaned itself, complimented you, and tucked you in without a word, you begin the most effortless journey of all. Sleep. Sweet dreams, dreamer. You are safe. You are home. And your dreams? They remembered to bring snacks. You step into the bedroom and pause. Not to rush toward the bed just yet, but to take it all in. The ceiling fan spins slowly above you, casting soft shadows that dance across the walls like lazy butterflies. With each gentle rotation, it breathes out kindness. You did your best today. You made it. Rest is holy too. A glass of cool water waits on the nightstand. No condensation, no fuss, just ready. The kind of glass you'd only find in a movie scene. It knows exactly how much you'll need, and it's been chilled to perfection. Beyond the window, the backyard is quietly tidying itself. A broom sweeps fallen leaves into elegant spirals. A rake fluffs the garden mulch with pride. Even the hose rewinds with a little curtsy. The stars above wink down through the trees, and you get the feeling the whole world is taking care of itself, just so you can let go. You sit at the edge of the bed. It doesn't rush you, it waits. And then it speaks, not in a voice exactly, but in a hush, like the feeling of someone who's always had your back. Before we sleep, it seems to say, let's give thanks. You nod, and together you whisper a little prayer. Nothing fancy, just the basics. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this body. Thank you for safety, for softness, and for the gift of being alive tonight. The bed breathes with you. Then slowly, with perfect timing, it leans back, inviting you in like an old friend, pulling open a cozy blanket fort. The sheets wrap around you with care. The pillows lean in just right. The moon watches over you from her favorite corner of the sky. And somewhere just beyond the edge of sleep, your dreams lace up their shoes, ready to walk beside you until morning. You are safe. You are home. Sweet dreams.